Welcome, everybody. Good to go. Maybe put this first slide up. All right. Thank you very much for joining us today for this session on efficient QC using IMF. I'm Pierre-Anthony Lemieux, and the chair of the IMF User Group. I'll talk about it in a little bit more in a few seconds, and I'll be your master of ceremony for today. All right. So what is the Interoperable Master Format? Very quickly, it's a component-based file format for high-quality audiovisual masters. It's been a SMPTE standard for a little bit over 10 years, and it's been broadly deployed by studios and their customers as well as broadcasters. And the IMF User Group is a community that's been built around the standard. It's worldwide. We have members in Europe, and North America, and it's actually organized underneath SMPTE in a brand new kind of community that SMPTE has made possible, called the SMPTE community. It used to be under HPA, same group though. We have about 100 plus members, large and small, from individuals all the way to trillion-dollar companies. And what we do is we organize events like this one. We have regular meetings. We create best practices. And, so if you're interested in IMF, if you're thinking of deploying IMF and you'd like to meet other users, implementers, the IMF User Group is a great place to do that. So please join us, and you can, of course, follow us on our various social media channels. All right, so QC. So the group met back at IBC in the last fall, and looked a little bit about the state of the art of quality control on the supply chain, and tried to understand what the challenges were and what IMF and the IMF UG and its members could bring to the party. And it's turning out that, not surprisingly, quality control is extremely expensive. It's expensive because, of course, when you talk about high-quality visual masters, just technically, they are really huge files, really high quality, so QC is just expensive technically. But it's also expensive because it often involves human intervention, right? A lot of QC is automated, but a lot of QC is manual. And the second you have people involved in loop, it's immediately more expensive. And what's even more expensive is not only doing QC, is when QC fails, right? That's when it becomes an exception. It's no longer, automated QC goes through, you get a green check mark, it's great. Oh, suddenly there's an error. Now you have to bring people, right? And often you may have even to bring back creators in the loop. And that's even more expensive, and expensive in money, but also in time. And even worse is when you have to do that multiple times through the life cycle of the content. And that's really what you're trying to avoid. And so, the group got together and tried to understand how it could make quality control more efficient. And so, for instance, ways you can do that is by minimizing repeated QC for the same material, right? If you distribute multiple versions and the image or the video has not changed, you should not have to do re-QC of the video and multiple times. You should do it only once, and we do it only on those scenes that change. Super important, and we'll talk about this in a few seconds. You really want to avoid repeated failures from known failures, right? So you don't want to keep on rejecting content for a failure that's actually an expected failure. And what are examples of that, and how do we prevent that? And of course, still very much post-it note and email driven, and should be great to move past that and have some kind of standardized QC reports, right? So that there's a way to read automatically this QC report and determine, has there been errors? Are there expected errors, without having to involve a human in a chain? And again, involving a human to read a PDF, that's boring, right? That's something that no one should have to do. All right. So this is again, just an overview of a typical quality control workflow for studio broadcaster. The studio broadcaster will have a set of target requirements for quality control. The content will come in at the bottom here, go through automated QC that will generate some exceptions, some notes that will probably have to be parsed by a human. It turns out that there's also manual QC, right? Quality control, removing the boom from a shot. Some of those exceptions might actually require human intervention. My favorite one is inserting color bars in the middle of a TV episode for creative effect, right? That will be picked up by most quality control automated QC. Will say, well, there's something wrong. You have color bars in the middle of your program. That means, you have two programs that are collated. Another one is scenes that are too dark, right? Well, that might be actually for creative effect. And so all those exceptions will be noted as part of the bottom process, and somebody will say that's fine, right? The color bars are fine, this dark sea is fine. And the challenge with a lot of QC workflows today is that information is lost. That content gets a green seal, right? Good to go, and it's sent on to the next step in the chain, right? To, for instance, the licensee. And they'll run their own QC, and they'll run into the same issues. And unless they're told this is expected failures, they will have to go, they'll reject it, and it have to be checked again. And so how do we prevent that kind of repeated QC failures to happen when you know there's an expected failure? And this is really where IMF, and we'll hear from both content owners and implementers, that's really where IMF can shine, because IMF can carry all that additional metadata. It can be as simple as, here are the places where QC is expected to fail on the timeline, and here's why. So don't reject content, right? This has been checked by the director. We're good to go. So today on the panel, or myself, of course, then we have Raymond Yoon from Amazon MGM Studios, who's going to give us the perspective from a major content platform. Faridun Khoshravi from Venera Technology, who has implemented some of those improvements to QC workflows, and as well as Laurent Stoll from Marquis Technology. And, I won't say too much. I'll let them present their own perspective. But before we get to them, Andrew Dunne from the BBC, who's been really influential and really involved in QC in general, could not be here today, but he's recorded a little 2-minute introduction, and so maybe we can just play it and hear in his own words.
Welcome to this session about efficient QC workflows in IMF. I'm Andrew Dunne, and I'm in charge of technical delivery standards for TV content into the BBC and co-chair of the EBU's QC group. When I recorded this video, I was talking to an empty room. I hope more people turned up today. So why are we here? We need to ensure quality control of our end-to-end video essence, and we're moving towards more component-based workflows using IMF. Bringing these two together could be a powerful game changer for the industry. We're specifically looking at the QC of the essence today, but some of the concepts are equally valid for the package structure and metadata. They're just not quite so pretty to look at. Traditionally, we would QC content at various stages throughout its production and distribution, both automatically and by eye. This QC information would be kept alongside the content as a piece of paper in a tape box or a PDF in an asset management system. But there was always the danger that this would become separated from the content, and it was usually only relevant for that file or tape. Wouldn't it be great to carry the QC information through the lifetime of the content, from production through post-production and into distribution? There are potential massive business benefits of carrying this information alongside the content, avoiding hours of unnecessary rechecking of content that hasn't changed from one version to the next. When there's an artifact in a shot from a natural history show, from a camera trap that's been left for 6 months, it'd be great to carry that information with the content forever. Or when someone deliberately adds bars and tone for creative reasons. And how do we go about standardizing how that would work? That's where IMF and EBU QC come in. They're both componentized ways of working, but by combining them, we can really change how we address QC and how we carry that QC metadata throughout the supply chain. I'll hand you over to the panel to take you through an example of how this might work.
All right. Let's go back. All right. So thank you very much, Andrew, virtually. And I think we'll go through the panel and then we'll take quick Q&A, and we'll start with Raymond.
All right. Well, thank you. And thank you, Pierre and Andrew. Gave the great introduction. And and Andrew has said it all and said it so well, I couldn't possibly do any better. But I do want to emphasize, number one, that on my Amazon Studios hat, Amazon is currently have not adopted IMF. So why are you here? The subject topic that we're talking about is of primary concern for the future. And ever since I arrived at the studio 3 years ago, every day talk about all this, and IMF is always of great interest and in pursuit of that. And I do want to emphasize, bring forward the point that, as Andrew pointed out, componentized workflow is important, whether IMF or not. It's happening anyway. We do not only just deal with content that has video and audio. We also have subtitle, captions, metadata, you name it. And immersive, guess what? Immersive audio, HDR, all that good stuff. And they have to be all dealt with as a package. And secondly, also super important is standardization and MXF, standardized file format, and any metadata that in header or along with the essence that is required by content owner as well as distributors can be carried permanently with the essence. And if there's anything new that you needed, come talk to me. I also edit the MXF, the universal label registers. And finally, all that leads to automation. And I need to applaud Andrew and the EBU's effort in standardizing the QC, codifying all the QC features that is existing out there and more to come. And we're on the path towards simplification of having QC profiles for content owners as well as everyone in the entire ecosystem supply chain that works on them. And well, on that note, I'm going to pass it to my colleagues who will show you how all that looks like, what all that looks like at the moment. Thank you.
All right. Yeah,
There we
here we go.
Well, hello, my name is Feridun Kazrabi with Venera Technologies. We are a automated QC software provider, and we're very happy to be part of this effort to showcase how the QC work can be carried across the flow, as Pierre mentioned, throughout the process. And so with Laurence, we took half of it and they took the other half of it. So our part was the initial part, the automated QC process and the annotation of the content. The idea being, let the system do the automated QC, let the operator be able to do the annotations necessary with it, and pass it on to the next stage of the workflow. So a few simple steps, designing a template that defines what checks should be performed on that content, then using our Quasar cloud-native solution to do the actual automated QC. And once the QC is done, using our QStudio solution to actually annotate and add comments and classify what has been reported, and finally be able to export it out with those comments to the next stage of the workflow. So very quickly, you generate a template using Quasar interface, defining what checks need to be performed, all those flexible and can be done based on the operator's needs and the needs of that workflow. Once the QC is done, then you can use, in our case, the QStudio solution, which allows you to interactively see the results of what Quasar performed, and look at the issues on a timeline to verify whether those issues are valid or not, and then add comments to it. The operator could then add additional comments, their findings to the result. That's all being captured. And it went too quickly, but you can also categorize. You can say this was, as Pierre was mentioning, this is creative intent. This is false positive. This is a valid error. So all that information can be exported out in a format that can be carried on to the next stage and becomes the starting point of having the QC report that carrying forward. One last comment I would make, as Raymond also mentioned, the EBU QC standard is extremely important, which allows the ability for this QC report to be in a format that can move forward to every stage of the workflow. And as Laurence will talk about how they will pull it in. So our next stage in our workflow is to have our QStudio be able to generate an EBU QC compatible report, which can then be pulled back into the IMF package for the next stage of the workflow. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Laurence Stahl from Marquis Technologies. So what we're doing is we work next after you. What we're going to show you is how we, in the context of a player, check the errors that are coming from Venera's report. How do we augment that information with human QC, and how we ultimately repackage that into the IMF, because we're here to talk about IMF mainly. So we at Marquis Technologies, we design solutions for the mastering and the QC, and we're going to speak more here about ICE, the QC player. So the first step is to drag and drop the IMF package inside the player. And I just make a quick focus here on how looks the CPL of the IMF. So on the top, you could see the different tracks that are inside the CPL, and below the different elements that are carried as a sidecar. Here we also drag and drop the report coming from Venera. It's not anymore the Venera report, what it's in our solution. So we took every error reported and we translate that into our own QC tool. Other information, the idea of having the report is to see it in the context of the timeline and of the image viewer. So we have dedicated tracks to show all the error markers, but not only the error markers, but also locators or SMT markers. And we also have the ability to just spot the single elements where are the errors. If I just go on and focus on the QC markers, every single here we can see what is coming from Venera report, and it's clearly labeled as creative intent or false positive. What is also very important here is this unique ID. So this unique ID is directly EBU QC unique ID. So for the purpose of this demo, we have mapped an error coming from Venera into EBU QC ID. But this is, as Feridun said, this is not the way to do it. The way to do it is to directly import the report in EBU QC. Why is it important? It is extremely important because, for example, in Venera tool, we're talking about freeze frame. In another QC tool, we could talk about freeze frame, duplicate frames. There is no common language unless you use something like EBU QC. So we also said that in a player, we also do some human QC. Here we spotted at the very end of the content some video drop. So what the operator will do, he will use our EBU QC implementation just to find and just type, oh, here I've seen a video drop. And only directly the information of the video dropout will come up, and he will just have to press play, press mark, and the report has been augmented with the operator's information. So the idea now is to wrap that into an EBU QC report. It's just a simple XML, and that XML will be added as a sidecar in the original IMF package. So if I just re-import the package again, we'll see second CPL below with the new sidecar. But just a sidecar is not enough. I mean, this is what's the point? So with EBU QC, we are now currently working on what's next. And what's next is wrapping this EBU QC XML into an MXF track. So why would we do that? So the first reason doing that is this MXF, it is directly synchronized with the CPL. It's synchronized with image. It's synchronized with audio, and it's not lost. It's not a sidecar that you lose sometime. So the idea of creating this MXF is also to create additional CPL that can be sent as to a specific operator, go back, these errors need to go back to color correction, for example, or this is different errors that can be all together. Because the idea is we can merge different kinds of report. So we could create as many MXF we would like to and make them stay in the package for the future. So creative intent has been signed by a specific operator. You will continue to know in the future where is that and who decided for that. If you want to see the implementation of this, you can come and visit us on our booth.
All right. Well, thank you very much for this overview. So we tried to go fast because we do want to leave time for Q&A. So just, again, a couple of closing comments. So what you've seen today is, the fact that you can today do more efficient QC, implement a more efficient QC workflow using IMF and in general component-based media, especially when you combine that with the EBU QC standard that standardizes the actual language for expressing failures and successes in QC. And again, if you're interested in continuing the discussion, we're going to have a quick Q&A. I'm told that you absolutely have to wait for the mic before you ask your question, but even more importantly, we'll be available afterwards. And please consider joining the IMF User Group. We'd love to have you there. Thank you very much again. All right. So first question. Don't be shy. Oh, we have one.
So I saw that it looked like in the user-defined errors that you set durations for things. Is that right? Like say black frames detected if it's, so many seconds, which makes sense to me. But then it makes me think that if you've got successive QCs downstream, that you'd really want your upstream one to be the shortest or match. Would you have to kind of be strategic there, making sure that you wouldn't want to say, okay, flag 5 seconds here, and then downstream flag 2 seconds. Is that right?
So the idea behind that is when the operator is seeing something on the image, he needs to go extremely fast. He's not paying for looking at the image. He needs to really define what the error. So the thing is, what errors does he knows by heart? So if you put a simple marker, then at the moment someone will have to define what is the error. And the way to use EBU-QC is to make sure that everybody understands the same vocabulary. So in case of video drop, everybody will understand, okay, this is a video drop. There's a description for that. So on the player itself, you just have to mark the range or just a frame where the error occurs and just select from the EBU-QC catalog, oh, this is my video dropout. Click, mark, done. No more interpretation. So that's the idea.
Thank you.
All right. Another question? Anything else? Oh, we have one here.
Hey, just curious, just because QC is potentially happening at like multiple stages, right? So if we're doing, say, an earlier QC at like the daily stage where we're often working in reels and then moving into sort of final delivery for the IMF, which may often be sort of conformed long time. Has there been any discussion about how that is sort of going to continue to be carried, that data and that time code conversion that potentially needs to happen, like post-conform or sort of post, migration along play?
So
I can answer.
Second.
So it depends. It's the ID between the IMF or the EBU-QC. Both are component based, and it's really dependent on your own personal workflow. So it's bricks, it's Lego bricks. You can build whatever you want. So if you decide to have a specific dailies QC process and then a specific mastering QC process, you can. And at the end, you can decide to wrap all or partial information. Again, you decide. It's Lego bricks. That's the idea of IMF and component based.
Yeah. So for instance, if your workflow is based around OTIO, you could start with having EBU QC reports including in the OTIO timeline. And when that's converted to IMF, that's the magic, right? The synchronization is kept instead of being lost, essentially.
One last piece is that because of IMF's structure, it makes it easier to carry all that stuff as a track along with it. So that's the advantage what IMF brings to the picture.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Is there provision for having multiple QC tracks if, for example, okay, yeah. So and can you elaborate on the actual data payload that's in the track, the QC payload, starting probably past the point where we have normalization of terms from the EBU standard, but at that point, what is actually being saved in that track?
So currently it's the XML. So EBU XML that is wrapped into an MXF.
Thank you.
And so, the idea basically is if you then end up editing that timeline that, and let's say do a shot replacement, that synchronization will be kept, right? So that part of the MXF file that corresponded to the QC MXF file, that part of that file will be removed just like the video is removed. So you don't need to resynchronize everything. One more question? Don't hold back. Oh, one more here.
EBU, what does EBU stand for?
European Broadcasting Union.
Okay. Thank you.
So EBU does many things like Eurovision and soccer, but they also have technical committees, and they've spent years trying to, and I think successfully, to try to categorize and classify QC quality control terminology and a way to communicate that using a machine-readable format. So if you go to ebu.qc.io, you'll see there's a number of QC cards, right? So things that can happen in QC that is available as a standardized format. All right. I think we're about to be out of time, so unless if somebody has some very last minute. So again, I'd like to thank our panel. Thanks, Florence, Feridoun, and Raymond. And thank you for your great question, and we're available afterwards, and feel free to bug us anytime. Thank you very much. I have a great show.